sound of the bulldozer tearing through my childhood home hit me like a punch to the gut. My grandfather built that cabin with his own hands, and now it was being reduced to rubble, without a permit, without a call. I wasn't even there. I was burying my father when Clara Witford, the smug HOA president, sent a bulldozer to demolish my legacy. They thought I was too broken to fight back, but they didn't know who I was. I've spent 18 years inspecting buildings. I know the law better than anyone, and I knew exactly how to make Clara pay. But what I didn't expect was what I'd find when I started digging. Clara Witford was everything you expect from an HOA president, authoritative, smug, and completely convinced of her own righteousness. She had that air of entitlement, like she thought the whole neighborhood was hers to control. When I first met her, I thought it was just a bad first impression. But no, that was her brand. She ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a white blazer clipboard and hand eyes, always scanning for someone to bully into submission. She wasn't interested in rules, not really. She was interested in power, her power. My family's cabin wasn't just a piece of property to her, it was a symbol of what she couldn't control. The more I refused to bow to her demands, the more relentless she became. After my father's funeral, she moved quickly, issuing a notice to tear down the cabin, demanding I comply with her arbitrary visual blight laws. I thought we could reason with her, show her the law, the documentation that proved my cabin was untouchable. But when I walked into that board meeting, she didn't even look at the papers. Instead, she dismissed everything I said with that fake sympathetic smile. "Rules are rules, Mr. Ale," she said, already making up her mind. The vote was already in, 6-0. They were bulldozing my family's history, and nothing was going to stop her, or so she thought. At first, I figured it was just part of the HOA game, the occasional note in my mailbox, the occasional complaint, the usual passive-aggressive nonsense. But it didn't stop. Every few days another letter would show up, a new violation, a new demand. Repaint your cabin, it's an eyesore. Remove the dock, it's not compliant. Tear down the shed, it's a hazard. I'd seen this before with other homeowners around Pine Hollow Shores, but I wasn't like the others. I wasn't some random homeowner who would back down when a power-hungry president barked orders. Still, it didn't sit right. Every note, every fine was a calculated move. She knew exactly how to push buttons, how to use the rules to her advantage, twisting them to fit whatever narrative she created. I'd spent my whole life here. The cabin, the dock, the land, they were part of me. This was my family's legacy, and no one, not even Clara Witford, was going to erase it. Yet every time I thought things would calm down, another demand arrived in the mail. It wasn't just the notes anymore. It escalated. One day I came home to find Clara standing at the end of my driveway, clipboard in hand, staring at the cabin with a look that said she was already planning its destruction. I was just finishing up my inspection rounds when I saw her out there looking like she owned the entire block. She didn't even wait for me to say anything. "Marcus, you need to remove that dock. It's blocking the HOA's view of the lake. If you don't take care of it, we'll have to do it ourselves," she said, her voice sweet but sharp beneath the surface. I stepped out of my truck, not knowing whether to laugh or lose my temper. "Clara, that dock has been there since the 1960s. My grandfather built it. You can't just come here and—" She cut me off, her tone becoming condescending. "Rules are rules, Marcus. You have 2 weeks to remove it or I'll take it up with the board." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my blood boiling. How could she even consider this? This wasn't just about a dock or a shed, it was about control. She was trying to erase my family's history for the sake of a view, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. 2 days later, I got a letter that took things too far. The HOA had filed a notice of non-compliance against my property, demanding I tear down the cabin, repaint it, and remove the dock. It was absurd. The cabin had been here long before the HOA existed, but Clara didn't care. She had a mission to bulldoze my family's legacy. The most infuriating part? The letter came just days after I buried my father, my last remaining link to this place. I called the board to request an emergency meeting, but Clara ignored my request. Instead, she pushed forward. 5 days after my father's funeral, the bulldozers arrived. My neighbor Lyall called me in a panic, his voice frantic. "Marcus, they're here, bulldozers, trucks. They're tearing your cabin down." I couldn't believe it. I told Lyall to start filming. What he sent me made my blood run cold. I watched helpless as the bulldozer bit into the front porch, my grandfather's porch. The same porch I had stood on as a kid, the same one my father had fished from, the same one my grandfather had built with his hands. The wood cracked under the weight of the machine, and diesel smoke billowed into the air, clouding everything I held dear. I didn't hesitate. I called the sheriff. "Someone's demolishing my property without permits," I said, my voice shaking with anger. The dispatcher's response was maddeningly indifferent. "We have a report that the homeowner was notified." I told her I was the homeowner, and I was in Memphis burying my father when this happened. "There's no permit, no asbestos inspection. This is an illegal demolition." But it didn't matter. She put me on hold. For 10 minutes I listened to the sounds of my family's history being torn apart. When the dispatcher came back, her tone had shifted to one of bureaucratic indifference. "Sir, the HOA representative on site presented a court order." There was no court order, but she hung up before I could argue. I raced home, but by the time I got there, it was over. My family's legacy gone in 11 hours. The bulldozers had done their job, and all that remained was rubble and a laminated sign stuck in the dirt. Violation of HOA Bylaw 14.3. Non-compliant structure removed. Restoration costs $31,800. Clara Witford had bulldozed my house, and now she was charging me for it. I couldn't let this go. I called the sheriff again, this time demanding they investigate the illegal demolition. But when the deputy showed up, he was less than helpful. "We've got a report that the homeowner was notified," he said, repeating what I'd already told the dispatcher. "I'm the homeowner," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "There was no notice, no permit, and no right to demolish my property. I'm here right now, telling you this is illegal. You need to stop it." The deputy didn't budge. "I'll check with the HOA, but it's their word against yours." It was clear to me that the sheriff wasn't going to help, and the HOA had too much influence over local authorities. But I wasn't about to let them win. This wasn't just about the cabin anymore. It was about sending a message to Clara and her cronies that they couldn't bulldoze their way through everything they didn't like. I needed to hit back, and I knew exactly how. I spent that night poring over legal documents. I knew the laws better than anyone, and I started building my case. I filed a police report for the illegal demolition, contacted an attorney, and began auditing the HOA's financial records. By morning, I knew exactly what Clara had done. She hadn't just demolished my family's home without cause, she'd broken multiple laws: no demolition permits, no asbestos inspection, no hazardous waste handling. Each violation was a felony. I wasn't just going to sit back and let this happen. I was going to make sure Clara Witford paid for what she had done. But I wasn't stopping there. I was going to make her entire empire crumble, one legal document at a time. And when it all came crashing down, I'd make sure the entire community knew exactly who had caused it. The mandatory HOA annual meeting was set for October 28th. The night before, Clara tried one last desperate move, smearing my name online with fake social media posts, even dragging my daughter Sierra into it. But it didn't matter. The community saw right through her lies. They were already on my side. I walked into the meeting the next evening with the confidence of a man who knew the truth, had his back. The parking lot was packed, news vans lining the streets, cameras ready. Inside, the tension was thick as Clara sat at the head of the room, her usual arrogance intact. She didn't expect what was coming. As she banged the gavel and started the meeting, I stood up. "Madam President," I said, my voice steady under State Statute 47.3, "I have the right to present evidence of fiduciary breach before any other business." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. Clara's expression faltered for a split second. Her smug confidence quickly turned to nervousness. She tried to maintain control, but she was losing it. "What's this about, Marcus?" she asked, her tone shifting from icy to defensive. I wasn't about to let her deflect. "I'm here to show everyone exactly what you've been hiding. Your lies, your manipulation, and most of all, your illegal actions." I nodded to Judith, my attorney, who stood up beside me. "Now, let's begin." I clicked the projector on, and the first slide lit up the room, my grandfather's cabin, golden light casting over the lake. It was beautiful, and it was gone. I heard gasps ripple through the crowd. Next, I pulled up the footage of Clara standing in my driveway, clipboard in hand, directing the bulldozer. The video showed the destruction, the legal violations, and the complete disregard Clara had for the law. I stepped forward. "Clara Witford ordered the demolition of my property without permits, without any legal authority. She's guilty of felony destruction of property and environmental contamination." The room was buzzing now, whispers turning into shouts. But I wasn't done. Judith clicked through a series of financial reports. The HOA's funds, $470,000 a year from 87 homes, only $290,000 had actually been spent. The rest, stolen. The missing $180,000 paid to Whitford and Sons Construction at 3 times the going rate for landscaping. Legal fees paid to Clara's disbarred brother-in-law, exorbitant restaurant tabs, spa visits, and car leases for Clara. The crowd was silent now, every single person absorbing the full scope of the fraud. The next slide was an email exchange between Clara and Derek 3 days before the demolition. Handle the AEL problem permanently. Bill it as emergency remediation, it read. Derek's response, done. He'll be too broken to fight back. The crowd erupted. Clara's face turned white and Derek's eyes darted around looking for a way out. But there was no escape. The truth was out and it was impossible to ignore. I stepped closer to the microphone, my voice cutting through the chaos. Clara Witford, Derek Whitford, you've used your positions to steal from every homeowner in Pine Hollow Shores. You've put this entire community at risk, and now it's time to face the consequences. Just as the room started to heat up, Detective Reyes stepped forward, flashing her badge. Clara Witford, Derek Whitford, stand up. The room went silent again, the tension palpable. 2 deputies entered the room and moved toward Clara and Derek. Clara's face twisted into a grimace of disbelief. She reached for the microphone again. This is a witch hunt, she spat. But it was too late. The deputies had already grabbed her arms. You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and destruction of property. The crowd erupted into applause as the cuffs clicked. I couldn't help but feel a wave of relief wash over me as I watched Clara and Derek led out of the room. Their reign of terror was over. The whole community had seen the truth, and they weren't going to let these criminals get away with it. Clara looked at me one last time, her eyes wide with fury. You ruined me, she hissed. I met her gaze, calm and unwavering. No, Clara, you ruined yourself. I just turned on the lights. The room erupted in cheers as the doors swung shut behind her. Justice had been served, and it was only just beginning. The room settled into a new calm as Clara and Derek were escorted out, but the buzz of excitement still hung in the air. There was a sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted from the entire neighborhood. The cheers slowly quieted as people began to realize that for the first time in years, they were free. They were free from the fear of Clara's rule, the worry that every small violation would be punished without mercy. The tyranny had ended. I stood in the middle of that room, taking in the sight of the people who had once been so afraid, now standing tall with hope. Neighbors I had known for years, some of them old friends, now looked at me with gratitude and admiration. It felt strange to be the one everyone was rallying behind, but the weight of it didn't feel heavy. It felt like justice, finally, after all this time had arrived. Lyle, the 7-1-year-old fisherman who had been the first to warn me, clapped me on the back. You did it, Marcus. You got us our lake back. Mrs. Nova, the retired CPA, smiled and said, We've all seen the damage she caused, but I'll tell you this, you've set us free. There were no more whispers, no more fear. Everyone who had been under Clara's thumb now stood united. I didn't have to say anything. The community spoke for itself. The truth had been laid out in front of everyone, and it was clear who the real criminals were. It didn't take long for the legal consequences to unfold. Clara pled guilty to 6 felonies: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and destruction of property. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison with 18 months to be served. Her luxurious Lexus was auctioned off to help cover the restitution costs, and her home was foreclosed. Derek didn't escape either. He was sentenced to 2 years and had his construction license permanently revoked. But the real punishment wasn't the jail time. It was the complete dismantling of the empire Clara and Derek had built on corruption. The missing funds, $540,000, were recovered, and they were redistributed to the homeowners of Pine Hollow Shores. Each person received a payout. Some used the money to repair their homes, others put it into savings, and a few donated it to a cause much greater than themselves, the Hank Ale Memorial Scholarship Fund. The scholarship would help local kids pursue skilled trades, an honor for my grandfather, who had built his life with his hands. That money wasn't just a payout, it was a sign of community solidarity. It was a reminder that the people who lived here weren't passive, weren't helpless. They had a voice, and together they could take down the tyrants who thought they could control them. The final chapter in this long saga wasn't just about revenge, it was about restoring what was rightfully ours. As part of the legal settlement, the HOA was dissolved. The funds that Clara and Derek had misappropriated were returned, and the entire structure of the HOA was dismantled. Instead, a new neighborhood association was formed, one run by the people, for the people. Lyle was elected as the new chair, Mrs. Nova as treasurer, and a local teacher took on the role of secretary. Real people with real concerns, not power-hungry individuals with hidden agendas. The best part came when the county, under the guidance of the new association, decided to restore public access to the lake, the dock, the walking trails, the peaceful spot where my grandfather's cabin had once stood. We even put up a bronze plaque in his honor, Hank Ale, Master Carpenter, veteran believer in community. The day of the dedication ceremony was one I'll never forget. The sun was shining, the lake sparkled, and for the first time in years, everything felt right. As we gathered around the dock, the community united in celebration. The laughter of children echoed across the water, and the smell of fresh cedar filled the air. Sierra filmed the whole thing for her channel, HOA Horror Stories. Her following had exploded, and now she was using her platform to push for HOA reform across the country. At that moment, it felt like the ripple effect of this battle wasn't just limited to Pine Hollow shores, it was going nationwide. The state legislature had even taken notice. They passed the Homeowner Protection Act, which made it easier to dissolve corrupt HOAs and classified illegal demolitions as an automatic felony. They called it Hank's Law. The governor signed it with me standing beside him, and it felt like the victory had spread far beyond just my family. As I stood on that dock watching the community come together, I realized something. Justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about healing. It was about giving people back what was taken from them and making sure it didn't happen again. Months later, when the last boards were hammered into the rebuilt cabin, I stood at the door, my hand running over the railing my grandfather had carved. It felt like home again. It wasn't just the wood or the nails, it was the spirit of my family and the spirit of the people who had fought to protect it. Clara's legacy was gone, but ours was just beginning. Sometimes, when I sit on the dock, a cup of coffee in hand, listening to the loons call across the lake, I realize that bullies like Clara hide behind clipboards and paperwork, but people like us, we stand on the side of what's right, and when the storm comes, we don't bend, we don't break, we rise. The cabin was rebuilt, the dock restored, and the lake was ours again. But more importantly, we'd learned that no one, no matter how powerful they thought they were, could ever flatten us again.